Don't look behind you. Don't look behind you. You'll die. You'll die. You'll die. Don't look behind you.
Hello again, audience. My favorite fans of horror, fiction, alike. I'm here to tell you a story. I, your humble and dear narrator, I was raised on horror. I was brought up in an environment where fear and terror were commonplace. I saw my first horror movie at the age of 4, Nightmare on Elm Street. I wrote horror stories as a child. At some point I stopped. I'm not quite sure why. My grandmother always used to call me morbid. I would come home from the school library reading the encyclopedia of serial killers and other macabre fare. As a young child, my family was actually prone to give me a good scare quite often, either through a terrifying story or jumping. Start! This probably contributed to my consistent paranoia and insomnia throughout my formative years. Well, this and other things. One of the stories that particularly comes to mind was the Iron Claw. This story is the one I'm going to tell you, and not one single bit of this is made up. Well, not by me. This was a genuine childhood story. Night that I was given. Now, before I go on with that tale that was given to me, I must explain a bit of backstory here. The layout of our little town was tiny and tight. As with most towns with train tracks that separated right down the middle, it was poor on one side and a little less poor on the other. You're welcome to look up Morehouse, Missouri if you don't believe me. Google Maps probably hasn't even mapped it out yet. I don't care to check it myself. My past is ripe with terrors, and many of which won't be revealing to the public. The whole town is based off of a sawmill that sits right on its outskirts. This sawmill was the life of the town. I was only 5 or 6 at the time, so I didn't know what that meant. Looking back, I've learned a lot I won't get into. Maybe later, but not yet. So I'm 6. We'll go with that, so that I don't have to break flow again. Anyway, I'm 6. The room is tiny, but huge to me. It's filled with toys and the like, a big window that overlooks the road. In one wall, there's a 3-foot by 3-foot square cut out where you can see a bed fitted into what was once a closet. People had died in our little house, and it was haunted. I knew that to be a fact from previous experience. Again, we'll get into that later, another time. Little 6-year-old, blood red-headed me, sitting in the little hole in the wall as my grandmother crouched down to look me in the eye through the hole of the dimly lit room. She bent over and hugged me and kissed me goodnight and licked my whole face just for good measure. It was a strange one, I won't lie, but I love her. not ready for bed, I whined. It's time to go to bed and go to sleep fast, or the iron claw man get you, she said in what I now recognized as a silly tone, but back then scared the crap out of me. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no iron claw man, I shouted, completely unaware of what she was talking about, but I knew it was total jive. Oh, you don't know? She said, faking curiosity while dropping her voice to a whisper. The iron clawman. He used to work at the old sawmill. He was a hard worker. Her voice barely above a whisper, but still distinct. One week he disappeared. They got a new machine. Several workers had just assumed he quit, but the foreman knew he was having some medical procedures done. He was getting up in years and was prone to needing time off. Next week he showed up to work like normal, but only on Monday. He was to run the new machine on Monday and shut it off since it wouldn't be needed again till Thursday. He didn't show up Tuesday to work. Since he was prone to medical problems, nobody thought of anything of it. But Wednesday, the foreman was getting concerned, so he made a few calls. After no response, he drove to the man's house. His car was gone, but the mail was piled up as if it had been stuffed full of 3 papers on the front porch. Newspapers. Something was off. So he called around to the people they mutually knew, and nobody had seen him. The man was prone to miss work, but he wasn't prone to disappearances without informing his boss. So he called the police and gave them the info, and the problem was no longer his concern. The next morning, however, the man was supposed to show up and run the new machine. It would be down to the foreman, as he was the only person qualified besides the missing man. When he went to turn it on, he noticed off to the side what looked like the tip of a boot. He walked around, and as he turned the corner, what he saw was enough to make him hurl. At this point, my grandmother covered her mouth and mimicked a gag. There on the floor was the man, looking pale and sick and almost dead. His hand was caught in the machine, mangled and only hanging a little bone and some flesh. He was rushed to the doctor and they amputated his hand. Believe it or not, amputated was in my vocabulary at this age. They didn't have anything to put there. He was sent home, no longer able to work. Well, she paused for dramatic effect. People didn't see much of him for a while. The foreman, I knew him. He told me one day he was about to fit 2 carts together when he noticed the male part of a hookup, a claw made of wrought iron, had been torn off. Not sawed or filed, it was jagged and torn. The reason he says he remembers it so well was it was the same day the first kid went missing. All the kids of the people working at the mill started to go missing. A new one every few nights. All the kids of the people working at the mill started to go missing. One every few nights. This, he says, scared the crap out of him. He says he started sleeping with his daughter just to be safe. Says one night he was laying in bed with her, and there was a tap on the window. The little girl got scared, even though he told her it was just the wind blowing a branch. But then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. She rapped her knuckles on the wall. Daddy, go look out the window, she pleaded. No, sweetie, I'm not getting up. If you want to check, you can. But I'm not getting up. I'll be right here if anything happens. It's just a couple of feet away, he told her. The little girl got up and walked to the window. Slowly, she scooted her 7-year-old little legs around toys and light to the curtain. As she got up to the window, she opened the curtain to see. Her voice had risen to a crescendo at this point. Nothing! So naturally, she went back to bed, laying on the outside now that she had gotten up so that her daddy didn't get woken up again when she inevitably wanted to check one more time. And moments later, after she laid down, just got comfortable. Tap, tap, tap. She tried to fight the urge to check and couldn't resist. Again, she got up to see nothing. The father was dozing as he heard the third tap, 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 thinking he'd have time to trim that tree tomorrow. He thought nothing of it as his daughter got up to check the third time. Or, as she lightly plopped back down in the bed and must have been too tired to care about anything else because she didn't move again, and he fell fast asleep. Thoughts of the sawmill passed through his head as he thought he caught a faint smell of sawdust. The real terror wouldn't come until the next morning, when he awoke to find, in the place of his daughter, was a burlap sack filled entirely with sawdust from the mill. The manhunt was on. They searched for days with the whole town at it by the time they gave up. Then a few days later, a man was going fishing when he caught the biggest catch of his life. It was the body of the little girl, cut open from groin to sternum. There, left in the little girl's body, was the iron claw that should have been holding together 2 cards. So if you ever hear the tapping, don't check. Don't check once. Don't check twice. And definitely don't check a 3rd time. Or if you do, you'll wind up in the little river. She got up and left the room to go to bed, leaving me alone with my terror. 30 feet and 2 doors were between us as I lay there in a hole in the wall, pitch black, terrified. And I tried as hard as I could to fall asleep to the sound of the tree hitting the window. Tap, tap,